Hi, welcome back to the workshop for episode 4 of the Les Paul Junior build, and in this episode we're going to take this lump of ebony and turn it into a fretboard. However, with this particular piece of wood, I think that's going to be easier said than done. Okay, so I've got this lump of ebony for the fretboard, and if I'm honest, I'm a little bit worried about it because on this side that's kind of been faced off a little bit, and I'll bring you in closer, but you might be able to see there's what looks like a lot of tear out on it. So I'm thinking this might not be a great piece of wood for planing, which is a shame because I like to put my radius in with a plane if I can, because doing it with a sanding block is a bit of a pain. But we are where we are with it. If we can't plane it, we'll just have to sand it. But my thoughts initially though are if I could perhaps get this through my thicknesser. It varies in thickness. It goes from about 7.3 mil up to about 8.8. So there's a lot more material on there than we need. I would like to get it down to 6 mil. So we've got, you know, 1.5 mil at least to play with. So I'll set the thicknesser up. We'll get this super glued and masking taped onto a little bit of a stouter board so it's going through straight. And we'll see if we can get it planed down. Okay, so that's gone through the planer and it's come out quite nice actually. There's a little bit of kind of tear out there, which is not brilliant, but it is on the edge. So hopefully we can lose some of that when we cut this to shape. And also we'll be sanding most of the radius on the edges, so that might disappear. You might also notice that I've super glued and masking taped a little block of wood in front of this in the direction that it was going into the planer, and that's just to stop any planer snipe. So in theory, although it doesn't seem to have got any, the planer snipe would be in this bit of wood and the bit that we want will be absolutely fine, which it is. So that's good. And I'll just get this off the backing board. And we can start to look at the next process, which is actually, I want to get this cut down so it's more parallel, because at the moment it's thinner at this end than it is at this end. I don't need all of the width, and I'd much rather have it parallel when it goes into the fret slotting jig. So I'll break out the marking gauge and we'll get this trimmed down. Okay, so that's cut down more rectangular now. I've marked up which is my face edge. This is a nice clean straight edge on there. So I'm going to attach my 24 3/4 inch scale rule to that. Now I only want 22 frets. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a little bit of masking tape and I'm going to cover up the markings for frets 23 and 24, and that way I'll know to stop cutting. And then it's simply a matter of attaching the blank onto the scale ruler. Now, you might just be able to see it there. On all of these little graduations, there's a line that comes from the notch. And what I do is I line up the edge of the fretboard with those marks at both ends. And then I know I'm running parallel to this template. And that just ensures that your fret slots are going in nice and square. So just get some masking tape on there. Some onto the wood. A good amount of super glue. And get that stuck on. And we can get our trusty slotting jig into the vise. And we're pretty much ready to go. Now, if you haven't seen this jig before, I think most of you will have done. Basically, there's a set of 4 guides on here, which I will check in a minute, but they should be set up so that they're absolutely square to the jig. And there's a little pin right down in here. And the little slots on this template locate onto that pin, cut your slot, move to the next pin, cut your slot, so on and so on and so on, and then you should have an absolutely perfectly cut fretboard from there. Okay, we'll dig the saw out of the drawer of crap and get cutting. Okay, so there's all the slots cut. Look to have gone in very, very nicely. And looking at them, they all look nice and parallel, which is lovely. So I'll just kind of very delicately get this off the template because I don't want to bend this. These fret templates are absolutely brilliant, but they're not particularly cheap, so I really do want them to last as long as they can, and bending them ain't going to make that happen. Right, so that's the slots in. So next up we need to start looking at the radiusing on this, and as I said earlier, I really want to, if I can, do some of this with a plane, but we are having issues with the grain on this wood. But what I'm thinking is, now I've got these fret slots cut in, it actually makes a kind of a stop cut for when I'm planing as well. So in theory it'd limit any issues to the space of the particular fret that it's falling on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fasten this down onto the bench top, and I'm just going to very delicately and experimentally kind of try and plane a bit off. And I'm just going to try and take some of the corners off, and I'm probably going to use a low angle block plane on this because that's, I think, my best chance of not tearing it up too much. The slightest hint of tear out on this and I'm going to stop and break out the sanding block and spend a miserable hour or so sanding this radius in by hand. But we'll try with the plane first. And almost immediately that's taken a chunk out here, which is rubbish, but it's not a disaster because it falls inside the area that's going to get cut away anyway. So it's a lucky escape, but it's a warning that this just isn't going to work with a plane. This wood is so unpredictable and brittle that the only way we're realistically going to do this is with a sanding block and some really rough paper, be some 60 grit and plenty of rubbing action. And I think while I do this, I'm going to have to take my Fitbit off because it'll think I've been for a run or something. So I'll get this off the bench and I'll get it set up in my little sanding jig and we'll break out the sanding block, and hopefully this won't take too long. Okay, so that's the radius roughed in. I started at 60 grit and then I've just swapped out to some 120 grit on the 12-inch radius sanding block. Sand that all in. You can feel when you've hit it all because there's no kind of smoothish patches. It's all got that kind of 120 grit scratch pattern in it. So that's good. I've checked it with a radius gauge and we're looking as good as we need to look at this stage. What I intend to do now is I need to get this out of the jig. I need to re-establish all the fret slots properly because we will have lost quite a bit of that. And then later on down the line, when we put the position markers in, we can switch up to some finer grits of sandpaper, get the radius exactly how we want it. And then we can continue to use finer and finer paper until we've got this polished to the finish that we want it. But that's all getting a little bit ahead of myself. I'll get this off the jig first. And we just need to set this up now so that we've got some clearance over the workbench so we can saw these slots back in. And I've just set up this fret slotting saw with its guide, and it's set just a little bit deeper than the tang of the fret because we know we're going to be doing a little bit more sanding on this board, so we don't want to make the fret slots too shallow. That would be a mistake. So basically all I'm going to do is just put it in the slot we've already made and kind of run it through and re-establish that slot until we get down to the stop. Okay, and there it is, all the fret slots cut back to depth. We've got the radius on, and we've managed to do all of that without tearing up this wood too much, which is absolutely amazing. So next up, we need to get this kind of trimmed down to size. We need to get the dot markers in. We need to put the position markers on the side of the fretboard as well. But all of that is going to be for the next episode. I'm going to leave this one here. So as always, don't forget to hit that like button if you've enjoyed this. Subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.